Hey guys, tonight we are taking a walk through ancient Rome, but not the shiny postcard version you see in museums. No, tonight we're stepping into the real, living, breathing, and reeking city. You're about to smell everything Romans smelled, and trust me, you probably won't survive this without wrinkling your nose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this little community stretches across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink, and suddenly you're standing on a dusty Roman street. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight of marble columns or fancy togas, it's the smell. Warm, heavy air carrying a mix of wood smoke, animal dung, sweaty bodies, and something fishy. The ground beneath your sandals is uneven, made of huge paving stones slick with yesterday's rain and whatever else has been dumped here. A cart creaks by, its wooden wheels grinding, pulled by two tired mules. You catch the sharp ammonia tang of their urine. Behind them, a boy tosses slop water out of a bucket. It splashes across the stones, carrying vegetable peels and gods know what toward the open gutter. The gutter itself is alive with the smell of rot. You wander forward, your senses on fire. Everywhere you look there's life, vendors shouting, women haggling, slaves sweeping doorways. You see a baker carrying fresh loaves from a smoky oven, the yeasty, charred smell almost comforting compared to everything else. For a moment, it's like stepping into another world, loud, messy, colorful, and very, very smelly. Mainstream historians agree that Rome was one of the most crowded cities in the ancient world, with nearly 1 million people packed into its heart. Scholars still argue whether this population density made the city unbearable, but right now, as you breathe in the thick air, it feels like too many bodies for too small a space. You turn down a narrower street, past a tavern spilling wine-soaked laughter into the night. The smell here is sour, fermented, like spilled beer that's been baking in the sun. Somewhere nearby, a woman empties a chamber pot into the gutter. You hear it splash before you smell it, and oh, now you smell it. Your feet carry you forward anyway, curiosity pulling you along. Rome isn't clean, but it's alive, and tonight, you're here to experience it all. The streets get busier as you walk, and you realize it must be early morning in Rome. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but vendors are already setting up stalls along the road. The smell hits you first, a powerful wave of crushed vegetables, raw meat, and cheap wine splashed on dusty counters. You step closer, watching as a woman, with a linen scarf over her hair, arranges baskets of onions and garlic. Their sharp, biting aroma makes your eyes water a little. Next to her, a fishmonger is already hacking away at yesterday's catch. The fish gleam dully, their scales flaking as they're cut open. And the smell is strong enough to make your stomach lurch. A man carrying amphory of olive oil bumps past you, cursing as he nearly trips on the uneven stones. The oil drips a little, leaving shiny dark spots on the ground. You can smell the earthy, slightly fruity note of the fresh press. The air is alive with shouting, prices being haggled, insults being thrown, someone laughing so loudly it makes you turn. You pass a stall selling honey cakes, and for a moment there's a brief, sweet reprieve from the chaos, warm, sticky, sugary smells. But it doesn't last. Somewhere nearby, a goat bleats loudly, and you realize there are animals for sale too, chickens, pigs, even dogs chained near the stalls. The mixed smell of fur, manure, and fear is impossible to ignore. Mainstream historians tell us that Rome relied heavily on imported grain and food shipments from across the empire. And when those shipments were delayed, markets like this one turned even more frantic. Scholars still argue whether food scarcity was a constant problem or an occasional crisis. But as you watch the crowd jostle each other, you can believe they'd fight for a loaf of bread if they had to. A group of slaves carries a litter past you, the noble inside pinching their nose with a silk cloth. Even the rich can't fully escape the smells, they just pretend to rise above them. You almost laugh at the scene. But then another gust of fishy, garlicky, sweaty air rolls over you and wipes the smile off your face. You find yourself weaving between stalls. Your senses overloaded, your stomach unsure whether it's hungry or nauseous. This is Rome at its most alive. And you can feel your heartbeat sinking with the chaos of the crowd. You wander deeper into the market district until you reach an area that smells stronger. At first, you think it's just more fish. But then you see the truth, this is where the butchers work. The street is darker here, the awnings above stained with who knows what. A man with a leather apron stands over a chopping block, his knife flashing as he cleaves through a side of goat. Blood runs down the grooves in the wood and drips into a small channel that leads straight into the gutter. You hear it before you smell it, a wet splatter, followed by the sharp iron tang of fresh blood. Your sandals stick slightly as you walk. The ground is wet, not just with water but with all the fluids from today's work. Flies swarm in small black clouds, landing on anything that stays still too long. One of the butchers notices you watching and grins, holding up a piece of liver like it's a prize. You politely nod, but your stomach tightens. The smell here is rich and heavy. It's not just the blood, it's the fat, the bones, the waste left behind. In the corner, a boy scrapes animal hides with a dull blade. The mix of wet hair and raw flesh producing a smell that is almost unbearable. Mainstream historians agree that ancient Rome's streets often ran with animal blood after market days. Scholars still argue whether the city ever tried to regulate slaughterhouses or keep them outside the walls. But today, at least, it seems the butchers have claimed this entire alley. You catch a glimpse of a dog lapping at the gutter, tongue stained red. It's both horrifying and oddly practical, nothing goes to waste here. Not even the runoff. Someone behind you shouts, and you turn just in time to dodge a bucket of water thrown into the street. It splashes against the stones, mixing with blood and washing some of it toward the sewer. The smell rises even stronger for a moment before the air clears again. You take a deep breath and keep walking. Your nose numb but your curiosity pulling you onward. You can't stop now, you want to see what the rest of Rome smells like. You turn a corner and notice a row of stone benches with perfectly round holes cut into them. At first, you think it's some kind of broken fountain. But then the smell tells you exactly what it is, a public latrine. The air is thick with the sour, unmistakable smell of human waste. You take a hesitant step closer, curious despite yourself. The benches are arranged side by side, no dividers. Just a single long gutter running beneath them. Water trickles faintly, carrying the waste away toward the city sewers. A man sits casually on one of the benches, chatting with another as if they were sharing a cup of wine instead of, well, doing their business. That's the thing, in Rome, toilets are social spaces. You watch as a slave dips a sponge on a stick into a bucket of salty water, ready to hand it to the next person. You quickly decide not to think too much about where that sponge has already been. The smell here is sharp and acrid, like ammonia mixed with something far worse. But there's another smell nearby, sweeter, almost floral. You follow it and find yourself standing outside a bathhouse. Steam drifting from its open doorway. You step inside and the world changes. The air is warm and wet, carrying the smell of olive oil soap, sweat, and perfumed oils used by the rich bathers. The contrast is almost dizzying. From the stink of the latrine to the spicy sweet smell of this place. A group of men laugh as they scrub each other down, slapping oil on their arms before scraping it off with curved strigils. The scraped mixture of sweat, dirt, and oil drips into a trough. And you try not to think about how much of that is just lying around in here. Mainstream historians agree that Rome's public baths were some of the most sophisticated in the ancient world, complete with heated floors and separate pools of varying temperatures. Scholars still argue whether these baths were a breeding ground for disease or a surprisingly hygienic innovation. But tonight you're just grateful for the brief reprieve from the harsher smells outside. You linger a moment longer, letting the warm air loosen your shoulders, but as soon as you step back outside, the cooler night air brings every street smell back in full force. It's almost overwhelming, but you can't help but smile. Rome may stink, but it's alive. You wander away from the bathhouse, following the sound of scraping and hammering, until you find yourself in a district that feels different. The air is thick here, heavy with a smell that makes you hesitate before stepping closer. It's sharp, sour, almost eye-watering. And then it hits you, this is where the leather workers ply their trade. You see piles of animal hides stretched across wooden frames, some fresh and still streaked with bits of flesh, others halfway through the tanning process. A worker with bare, stained arms uses a blunt knife to scrape fat and hair from a hide. The sound is wet and rhythmic, like someone sharpening a knife in slow motion. Buckets of foul-smelling liquid sit everywhere. The stench coming off them is unbearable, a mix of rotting flesh, smoke, and something chemical that burns your nose. You suddenly remember that Roman tanners often used human urine as part of their process. And now that you think about it, you notice a few slaves carrying amphorae marked with public urinal symbols. The smell is so strong it almost feels physical, clinging to your skin and clothes. You watch as a man dunks a hide into a vat, stirring it with a wooden pole. The liquid turns cloudy and thick, splashing onto the ground. A dog licks at the puddle, unfazed, while a boy wrinkles his nose and backs away. Mainstream historians agree that tanning districts were often placed downwind from residential areas when possible. But in a city as packed as Rome, people living nearby had no choice but to deal with it. Scholars still argue whether leather workers were respected artisans or considered unclean by polite Roman society. But looking at their stained tunics and cracked hands, you can guess their job was far from glamorous. The workers don't seem to mind, though. One whistles as he works, another laughs at a joke you can't quite catch. For them, this is just another day, another batch of hides to turn into sandals, belts, and armor. You turn to leave, and for a moment the smell follows you, like it's soaked into your hair. By the time you've walked 2 streets away, you realize you're breathing through your mouth just to keep going. Rome, you think, is not for the faint of heart or nose. You decide to head toward the nicer part of the city, curious to see if the air smells any better there. The streets widen, the paving stones look cleaner, and the houses rise higher, their facades painted in bright reds and yellows. And yes, the smell is different here. Less dung, less fish, fewer gutters running red. You catch the delicate, spicy scent of imported perfumes wafting from an open window. Somewhere nearby, someone is burning incense, the smoke curling lazily into the air. You pass a wealthy matron stepping out of her home, trailed by 2 slaves carrying baskets. She is drenched in perfume, roses, saffron, something musky you can't quite name. The scent is strong enough to mask almost everything else for a moment. She holds her chin high, walking as if the world smells just as good as she does. But then, a gust of wind carries the smell of the tanneries back into this neighborhood. It mixes with the perfume, creating a strange, almost nauseating combination. You realize that no matter how rich you are in Rome, you can't fully escape the city smells. You spot a boy selling little pots of cheap perfume and scented oils. He waves one under your nose. It's a sharp smell, heavy on cinnamon and myrrh. You can see why people would want to carry it around. One sniff could hide the stink of a whole alleyway. Mainstream historians tell us that Romans loved scents so much they imported spices and perfumes from across the empire. Arabia, India, even distant China through trade routes. Scholars still argue whether this obsession was a sign of luxury or simply survival in a world where most things smelled terrible. You keep walking, the scents shifting with every turn, one moment incense and roses, the next sweat and dung. Rome is a city of contrasts, and your nose is beginning to feel like it's running a marathon. You find yourself smiling despite it all. The rich may have their perfumes, but they still walk the same streets as everyone else, still breathing the same air. still wrinkling their noses when a cart of garbage rolls past. And tonight, so do you. You follow the smell of damp stone and trickling water until you find yourself standing at the edge of one of Rome's most famous engineering marvels, the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer. At first glance, it just looks like a dark stone arch with water flowing out. But as you get closer, you can hear the echoes from deep inside. The slow gurgle of the city's waste making its journey out toward the Tiber River. The air is cool here, but thick, a humid, earthy stench that clings to your throat. You imagine stepping inside, following the torchlight through the tunnels. The walls are slick with centuries of runoff. And the sound of water is everywhere, dripping, rushing, gurgling. Somewhere above you, someone might be tossing their chamber pot waste down a drain, and you'd hear it splash nearby. Historians tell us that the Cloaca Maxima was one of the oldest structures in Rome, first built by the Etruscans before Rome was even fully a city. Scholars still argue whether it was built mainly for drainage or as a show of power. Proof that Rome could tame nature itself. You crouch by the tunnel entrance, taking in the mix of smells, stagnant water, rot, faint hints of soap and ashes. There's something strangely peaceful about it. Like the whole city is whispering its secrets down here. Then a rat scurries past, breaking the illusion. Its wet fur leaves a streak on the stones as it disappears into the darkness. You take a step back, suddenly very aware that this is still an active sewer. You can't help but think about the people who worked down here. Slaves who had to clear blockages by hand. Men who spent their lives knee-deep in filth so the rest of the city could keep functioning. The smell is awful, but there's something humbling about it. You breathe in one last lungful of the damp, sour air, then retreat back toward the streets. Somehow, even the stink of the marketplace smells fresh after that. Your nose has officially been through a full workout, and you still have more of Rome to explore tonight. You step out of the damp darkness of the sewers and into another world, one filled with warmth, steam, and voices. You're at one of Rome's public baths, the Thermae, and immediately the air feels different. It's thick with heat, scented with a strange mix, sweat, olive oil, floral perfumes, and just a faint edge of mildew from all the water that never quite dries. Your skin prickles as you enter, like you've stepped into a giant sauna that smells of humanity. You wander past the first room, the apodyterium, where men are undressing, folding their togas neatly into baskets watched over by slaves. The air smells of oiled leather sandals and linen. You imagine leaving your own clothes behind. Suddenly just another Roman here to soak the day away. Deeper in, the soundscape changes. In the tepidarium, the warm room, the steam is hazy, and voices sound close and intimate. Men gossip here, debating politics, sports, even philosophy. The smell of perfumed oils drifts from one corner, where a strigil, a curved scraper, is being used on a man's back, scraping sweat and dirt away into a little pile that will be tossed aside. It's oddly hypnotic to watch. This is more than just bathing, it's a ritual. You breathe in and catch a faint sweetness. Maybe rose oil or myrrh, masking the harsher human smells. When you finally step into the caldarium, the hot bath, it's like walking into a cloud. The steam makes your hair damp immediately. The smell here is mineral and heavy, hot water on stone, mingled with the musky sweat of a dozen other bodies. Historians say that Roman baths were the social hubs of the city, where deals were struck and alliances formed. Scholars still argue whether women had equal access to all the facilities or only certain times of day, but tonight, in your imagination, the rooms are full, buzzing with life. You sit at the edge of a pool and dip your hand into the water. It's almost too hot at first, but soon it feels soothing. You picture staying here for hours, letting the steam loosen your muscles. Somewhere nearby, a slave pours water onto a brazier, and the hiss of steam makes everyone exhale at once, as if sharing a collective sigh. For a moment, you close your eyes. You can almost forget the sewers, the streets, the stench of yesterday. For just a little while, you are part of Rome, sweating, talking, soaking with its citizens. When you leave, the cool night air outside will smell sharper, cleaner, almost shocking after all that heat. But for now, you just breathe in the heavy air, letting it fill your lungs like a warm blanket. When you step back into the streets, it's evening now, but Rome never really sleeps. The torches along the Forum throw a warm, flickering glow. And suddenly you notice how much the smells have changed. The first scent that hits you is sharp and coppery, the unmistakable tang of fresh blood. You've wandered past a butcher's stall, where a half-dismantled pig hangs from a wooden frame. A man with a cleaver works quickly, slicing chunks of meat for waiting customers. The ground beneath is stained dark, and you can smell the iron-rich scent rising up, mixing with sawdust and smoke from the nearby fire. You wrinkle your nose, but there's more. The air here is alive with overlapping food smells, roasting sausages, fried fish, garlic sizzling in oil. Rome's street food is legendary, but it isn't always fresh or pleasant. You drift closer to the fishmongers, and the smell intensifies. There are baskets of eels, still wriggling, their slick bodies glistening in the firelight. The fish that aren't alive sit on slabs, their eyes already glassy, giving off that sharp, salty odor that clings to everything. Nearby, someone is grinding garum, the famous Roman fish sauce, in a big stone vat. The smell is nearly overwhelming, fermented fish guts turned into a delicacy. People love it, sprinkle it on everything like ketchup. But to your nose it's enough to make your stomach lurch. Still, it's fascinating. You watch as a vendor hands a clay bowl of steaming stew to a customer, who slurps it down right there, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. The air is thick with smoke, oil, sweat, and spice. Scholars still argue whether the average Roman's diet was truly nutritious or just barely kept them alive, but tonight, you can almost taste it. There's barley bread baking somewhere close by, its nutty aroma fighting to compete with the stronger smells. As you keep walking, you pass stalls selling honey cakes, figs, and olives soaked in brine. The sweetness of the honey is almost a relief after all that meat and fish. This is the scent of survival. This is the smell of a city feeding itself, raw, intense, and unforgettable. By the time you step away from the market district, your tunic smells like smoke and fish. The cooler night air feels fresh again, even if it still carries hints of dung and wet stone. You take a deep breath and realize you've just walked through the Roman dinner hour. And somehow, even though your stomach is queasy, you feel a little hungry too. You leave the clamor of the markets behind and head toward the shadowy outlines of Rome's temples. The city feels calmer here, almost reverent, as if even the wind is quieter. The first thing you notice is the smell, not of sewage or fish this time, but of burning incense. The air is thick with it, sweet and resinous, clinging to your hair and clothes. It smells like pine sap mixed with something smoky, almost peppery. You follow the scent until you stand before a temple entrance lit by torches, their smoke curling into the night sky. You step inside, and the world seems to hush. The marble floor is cool beneath your feet. Priests move slowly, deliberately, their linen robes whispering as they pass. They carry censers that send up trails of smoke, filling the air with frankincense and myrrh. Somewhere deeper in the temple, an offering is burning. You catch the smell of singed meat, maybe a goat or a bird, sacrificed to the gods. It's strange, both mouth-watering and unsettling at once. The fire crackles softly, and you can almost hear someone murmuring a prayer. You approach the altar and see a little bowl of wine poured out, staining the stone a deep red. There's a faint whiff of sour grapes mixed with the smoke, and it hits you that this is an ancient smell, one your nose is sharing with millions of Romans who stood here centuries ago. Historians believe that incense was more than just ritual, it masked the city's foul odors and made the temple feel like stepping into another world. Scholars still argue whether common people were allowed to freely roam all parts of these sacred spaces. But tonight, in your mind, you're welcomed. You kneel, feeling the stone cold against your knees, and close your eyes. The smell of the burning offering, the hiss of the fire, The resinous sweetness of the incense, it's almost hypnotic. When you stand again and step back outside, the night air feels fresher, cooler. Almost like you've been cleansed. The faint smell of smoke follows you, trailing behind as you return to the streets. A reminder that you've been somewhere holy. Somewhere out there, other temples are still burning their offerings, filling the Roman night with ribbons of fragrant smoke. For a moment, the whole city seems to breathe it in. You turn a corner and stumble into a part of Rome that smells completely different from anywhere you've been tonight. Here, the air is light, sweet, almost luxurious. You've found the perfumer's quarter. Tiny shops line the street, their doorways spilling soft lamplight onto the stones. Inside, shelves are packed with little clay jars and glass vials, each one holding something fragrant. The first thing that hits you is the smell of roses, crushed petals steeped in oil. It's rich, heady, and clings to your nose. You step inside one of the shops. A woman in a simple stola is grinding herbs with a stone pestle. The smell of mint and cinnamon mixes with the faint waxy sweetness of beeswax, used to make salves. You can hear the rhythmic scrape of the grinder and the soft clink of jars as she works. You pick up a small jar and pop the lid. Inside is spikenard oil, earthy and musky. The scent is warm, deep, almost animal-like. You can imagine a Roman noble wearing this to dinner to announce their wealth, before they even speak. Nearby, another jar holds saffron, its bright threads giving off a sharp, honey-like aroma. Scholars still argue whether most Romans could afford these exotic imports or if they were reserved for the elite. But right now you can smell them all as if you were one of the city's richest residents. The perfumer gestures to a shelf of cosmetics, lead-based face powders. You wrinkle your nose at the faint metallic smell. Rouge made from crushed berries, and kohl for lining the eyes. It smells faintly smoky, earthy, like burnt almonds. Historians note that Romans were obsessed with smelling good, not just to mask the city's odors, but as a status symbol. Smelling like myrrh or cinnamon meant you were somebody. You dip your finger in a little jar of almond oil and rub it between your fingertips. It's smooth, silky, leaving your skin glistening. The smell is light, almost edible. When you step back out into the street, the city smells different to you now. The stench of dung and smoke feels farther away, muted under the thin veil of rose and cinnamon clinging to your hair. For a brief moment, you feel less like a visitor and more like a Roman, one who can carry their own pocket of sweetness through the chaos of the city. You leave the city behind now, stepping out through one of Rome's great gates. The noise and smoke fade with every step, replaced by something softer, the smell of open fields. It's the countryside, and the first thing that hits you is the sweet, clean scent of grass after a long day of sun. The air feels fresher here, easier to breathe. You walk along a dirt road, your sandals crunching over stones, and you can smell the dry dust rising around you. Somewhere nearby, a farmer is turning the soil with a wooden plow. The smell of fresh earth is strong, loamy, almost comforting. It mixes with the faint smell of manure spread across the fields. Pungent but somehow right at home here. You pass a grove of olive trees, their sharp, resinous smell wafting in the evening breeze. The leaves shimmer in the last light of the sun, and you catch the faint odor of crushed olives from a nearby press, rich and a little bitter. Further down the road, you hear the soft lowing of cattle. You step closer to a small farmyard and breathe in the warm animal smell of the stables, hay, dung, leather, and the musky scent of livestock. It's strong, yes, but somehow grounding. Historians say that most Romans lived outside the big cities, working the land. Scholars still argue whether the average farm smelled more pleasant than the crowded urban streets, but as you stand here, with the breeze carrying the smell of wheat and wet soil, you feel like this might be the cleaner life. You wander past a vineyard, the air tinged with the sour-sweet smell of fermenting grapes. Somewhere a dog barks, and you catch a whiff of wood smoke from a farmhouse fire. It's cozy, simple, familiar, like the earth itself is cooking its own dinner. As night falls, the smells deepen. The damp air smells of dew settling on plants, and you breathe it in like a cool drink. For a moment, you almost forget the crowded city entirely. This is Rome too, not just marble temples and noisy forums, but farms and fields, manure and wheat. This is the smell of the empire feeding itself. When you turn back toward the city, the faint stink of Rome is already creeping into the wind. But for now, you take one last deep breath of the countryside before heading back toward the gates. The peaceful countryside fades as you step back into the city, and the sound of shouting draws you toward another part of Rome. Tonight, there's a crowd gathered, and the smell tells you exactly where you are, the amphitheater. The first thing you catch is the scent of dust. The arena floor is covered in sand, and with every footstep of the crowd shuffling into their seats, little puffs rise into the air. It smells dry, gritty, baked by the sun. Then comes the sweat, thousands of people packed shoulder to shoulder. The smell of unwashed tunics, leather straps, and excitement. The air feels thick with anticipation, almost sticky. You make your way closer, and now the metallic smell of blood hits you. On the sand, a gladiator has just fallen, and the coppery tang carries all the way to where you stand. It's sharp and unmistakable, mixing with the smell of hot iron from the weapons. Somewhere below the arena, you hear a roar, and suddenly, another smell hits your nose, the musky, pungent odor of wild animals. Lions, leopards, maybe even a bear. The scent is animal and raw, making the hairs on your arms stand up. You watch as a door creaks open and a gladiator steps out, glistening with sweat and oil. The smell of olive oil carries even here, mingling with the dust and blood. Historians say that some Romans would even collect gladiator sweat, believing it had magical or medicinal powers. You can almost imagine someone bottling it just now, the air so thick with it. Scholars still argue whether these games were truly beloved by everyone or if some came only out of duty, but tonight, the crowd is loud. The smell of roasted nuts and cheap wine wafting from the stands as they cheer. The fight is brutal, fast. The sand drinks in the blood, and the smell becomes stronger. When the match ends, and the crowd roars approval, you feel the air shift, a mix of relief, triumph, and exhaustion. When you step back outside, the fresh air feels like freedom. But the smell of the arena clings to you. The scent of sweat and dust and death following you like a shadow. For a moment, you realize you've just smelled something as close to pure adrenaline as history can give you. You follow the sound of gulls now, leaving the arena behind, until the air itself starts to change. It grows cooler, sharper, and suddenly you can smell the sea before you even see it. Rome's harbor is alive tonight. The first scent that hits you is the salt, that unmistakable briny tang of seawater mixed with wet stone. You breathe it in deeply, and it feels almost cleansing after the heavy, dusty air of the city. You step onto the wooden planks of a dock, and they creak under your sandals. The smell of tar rises up, thick, sticky, almost sweet, used to seal the ships. You run your hand along a rope, and it smells of hemp and seawater, damp and rough against your skin. Nearby, fishermen unload their catches. The smell of fresh fish hits you hard, sharp, and cold, mixing with the smell of drying seaweed clinging to the boats. The gulls scream overhead, circling, hoping for scraps, their wings flashing white in the torchlight. You walk past barrels of salted fish, the brine stinging your nose. Somewhere further down the docks, someone is boiling pitch to repair a hull, and the air smells smoky and chemical, almost choking. Historians say Rome's harbors were some of the busiest in the ancient world, bringing grain, wine, and exotic goods from across the empire. Scholars still argue whether the smell here was more of the sea or of the sweat of thousands of workers unloading cargo. Tonight, it's both. The air is alive with effort, the grunts of men rolling amphorae, the squeal of wooden carts on stone, the rhythmic splash of oars from a ship pulling in. Somewhere nearby, someone is cooking fish stew over a brazier, and the smell of garlic and herbs wafts through the salty air. You feel your stomach growl, even though the smell of raw fish still lingers. When you finally step back from the water's edge, your clothes smell faintly of tar and brine. The sea breeze tugs at your hair, cool and fresh, carrying with it the distant promise of far-off lands. As you walk back toward the city, the salt smell fades slowly, replaced once again by Rome's familiar blend of smoke, dung, and stone. But for a moment, you felt like you could have boarded one of those ships and sailed anywhere. Night has fully fallen now, and Rome feels softer, quieter. The clamor of markets and the roar of arenas have faded, leaving only the faint crackle of torches and the occasional bark of a dog. Somewhere far away, you wander down a narrow street lit by oil lamps. The first thing you notice is the smell, the sharp, smoky tang of burning olive oil. It hangs low in the air, mixing with the faint scent of cooling stone. The streets are mostly empty now. The last of the food stalls are packing up, their fires hissing as they're doused with water. You can smell the steam rising, a mix of charred wood and cooked meat, quickly swallowed by the night air. Somewhere nearby, you catch the faint odor of a tanner's shop, acrid, sharp, almost like vinegar, still lingering even though the workers have gone home. Another street carries the warm, sweet smell of bread cooling in a bakery, ready for the morning. Historians say that Roman nights could be dangerous, but also strangely peaceful. Scholars still argue whether most citizens stayed in or ventured out after dark. But tonight, you walk freely, enjoying the stillness. The city's usual stinks seem muted now. The dung piles smell faint but earthy, not overpowering. The drains are quieter. The air is cool and slightly damp, carrying the distant sound of the Tiber lapping at its banks. You pass by an insula, an apartment block, and smell smoke from cooking fires drifting down through the windows. You hear muffled voices, laughter, the clink of clay cups. Life is still happening here, but it feels private, contained. At the edge of the forum, you stop and breathe in. The air smells of dust and stone, as if the marble itself has soaked up the day's heat and is now cooling off. The torches flicker, casting golden halos of smoke. For the first time all night, the city smells almost clean. You feel your shoulders drop, your breathing slow, as if Rome herself has gone to sleep. You find a quiet step to sit on and just listen. The smells of the day, blood, sweat, fish, incense, perfume, all seem far away now, softened by the cool night air. You let your eyes close and imagine the stars above the city. Somewhere, a single torch sputters, and its smoke curls upward, carrying the last scent of Rome into the night. And here, with the city finally still, you feel the day slip away. The streets of Rome grow quieter in your mind until they are nothing more than a memory, just faint images of torchlight and the soft glow of oil lamps on stone. The air feels cooler now, as if the whole city has exhaled and gone still. You stay seated on that stone step a moment longer, breathing slowly. The scents that filled the day, the sweat of the markets, the smoke of the fires, the sharp smells of animals and people, all seem to dissolve into the night. There's just the faint sweetness of cooling bread and the distant, earthy smell of the river. Your eyelids grow heavier. You imagine the city sleeping with you, the bakers done kneading their loaves, the vendors asleep on straw mats, the guards standing watch with heavy, half-closed eyes. The noise of the day becomes softer, as if someone turned the whole city down to a whisper. The last smell you catch is olive oil smoke, curling upward like a slow lullaby, then even that fades. The marble steps under you feel warmer now, more like a blanket than stone. Your shoulders loosen, your hands rest in your lap, and your breathing falls into the slow rhythm of the night. Somewhere, the Tiber flows on, but you don't need to follow it. Tonight, you can stay right here, safe, quiet, still. And as the last torch gutters out, Rome disappears completely into the dark, leaving you floating in a softer, safer place. Sweet dreams.